The question about why is Brockton having so many challenges can actually be answered because, as you may already know, Brockton is the only city in Plymouth County, the only city in the middle of a bunch of other communities. When you look at even Plymouth County, we're the only city in Plymouth County, but at the same time, we're located on the far west point of Plymouth County. And we're surrounded on that side by smaller communities as well, Stoughton, Easton, and West Bridgewater down on that end there. So it's not necessarily, we're not surrounded by Somerville, Cambridge, or some of these other cities around Boston in the sense. We're surrounded by a bunch of communities. So as a major city in the middle of this large, small community in the sense, we basically become the catch-all for everybody. When you look at the issue of homelessness, the issue of the opioid issues that we have, the vast majority of the people who are affected by homelessness in the city of Brockton are not people from Brockton. They're people that come from other communities and they install themselves in Brockton, becoming a Brockton problem, but not necessarily a Brockton issue. There were issues in their communities where they lived. They left those communities to come to Brockton, and now it becomes a Brockton problem. So people that come from other communities, they look at the homelessness issue, for instance, in Brockton, and they think that, oh wow, the city is filled with homeless. Yeah, of course it is the issue, but in fact, that issue is not of Brockton's creation. The same thing happens with a lot of the opioid and the overdoses that you see in the community. They're actually individuals that come from elsewhere. And Brockton is where the hospitals are. It's where the social services programs are. So when individuals come into our communities, they become enrolled into whatever situations they find themselves enrolled in, and end up dying in some instances in the hospitals of Brockton. So, and those statistics count against the city. It doesn't matter if you live in Whitman, if you overdose and you die at Brockton Hospital, it becomes a death for the city. And so those numbers sometimes don't tell the entire truth or story of what's going on around the city of Brockton. And of course, being a city of 100,000 plus people, we have our own issues with gun violence. We have issues that affect the immigrant community a lot more than it affects the general communities, because we immigrants face additional problems or additional issues with the language issue, with citizenship and the ability to acquire the services that often we need. But it's hindered by the fact that we do not have the ability to communicate across programs or communicate across boundaries in a way. So it is an issue that Brockton faces probably more than other communities. Because when you look at diversity, actually now Brockton is the only majority black city in New England. When I say black, I'm talking about the African American community, the Haitian, the Cape Verdeans, and the Dominicans, or some of the other black folks that live in our community. So when you put all those individuals together, the city is now a majority black city, the only one in the entire New England. There are other minority cities, but as far as the black city, we are the only one in New England, or the majority of. And of course, we face the challenges that a lot of the other minority cities are facing, which is we have a lack of state support. When you look at what some of these other communities get from the state in terms of prevention dollars, Brockton doesn't get those dollars, or we don't get it as widely or as in quantities like some of the other communities get. So that becomes a problem. we can't complain about youth violence without providing the youth with some things to do during the after hours on weekends and stuff that the young people are looking for. So we don't have the resources that some of those other communities have. We barely have federal resources in our community. Yeah, we get the ones for, the title funding that comes for the schools, or the funding that comes through Mass Health, or the housing. But in terms of preventive dollars, we don't get a great deal of dollars from the federal government that we should be getting. Some of it is due to our inability to get those funds. We don't spend a great deal of time applying for federal grants. Often the grants that we applied for are general grants in terms of grants that goes to, housing and education, but not in the prevention piece. So those are some of the issues that we often face that bring some serious challenges to our city that other communities are not facing. So those, in my opinion, are some of the things that actually prevent us from grabbing some of these issues that we have in the community and do something about it, because it actually requires some resources, some funding that we do not currently have.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. But, let's go, back to one of the main problems, Brockton is facing, our tax base. We don't generate enough money to fund our program. For I would say, 30 years I've been living in Brockton. When you are running for office, you always say the same thing. But in terms of, finding, other ways, to raise, to increase, the tax base. But for 30 years, nothing changed.
Well, Yves, that's actually a very good question. Our taxes for residents it might be perceived that it's higher than most communities, but it isn't. When you look at our taxes, the taxes that the council or the city controls is that per thousand taxes, meaning that if the value of your home, let's say your home is valued at $100,000, your taxes will be, it's about $12 or about $13 per thousand. So if your house is worth $100,000, your taxes would be like $1,300. If your home all of a sudden goes up to $200,000, your taxes are going to go up to $2,600. And if it goes up to $300,000, you're now looking at over $4,200, because the taxes are based on the value of the property. It's not based on what we assess in taxes. Therefore, the higher the value of your land or your property goes, so does your taxes. As a matter of fact, in the last, I would say probably a good 6-7 years, we've lowered taxes every year. We keep lowering that per thousand. We can't bring it to zero because the state also requires the communities to generate their own taxes. Now, what we do lack in the city of Brockton is commercial taxes, to take the burden off of the residents. So I remember one time I met up with, we had gone to a meeting in Boston, and the late Mayor Menino told us, myself and Mayor Harrington that had gone to that meeting with them, that what he gets from one international place, a small street in Boston, in commercial taxes is more than the entire city's commercial tax. So one little street, he collects more taxes than the entire city, because we don't have a great deal of commercial taxes in the city. In the little that we have, we can't tax them out of the community, because we got to make sure that they stay to pay a portion of their taxes. So again, there's this perception of the city being taxed at a higher level than most communities. But in reality, if you look at what people pay in tax, and again, utilizing our surroundings, in Easton, in Stoughton, in the Bridgewaters, around Abington, Whitman, our taxes are lower than their taxes in total payment. The percentages might be higher in Brockton, but because the values of the homes in those communities are much higher, they're paying a lot more in taxes than they do. And to be honest with you, when you look at it, even our water and sewer bills, yes, somebody might say, oh, it's too high, but it's not higher than the communities around us. The water that you pay in the city of Brockton is a lot less than what people in Stoughton pay because they're hooked up to the MWRA and their water rates are a lot higher than what Brockton pays. So again, it's more of a perception. And if you paid, let's say again, let's go back to that, my property is only worth X, Y, and Z. Well, let's say if you live in a block, in the way the taxes are taken care of, they're done by blocks. If three people, the three of us live in a neighborhood and our homes are worth $100,000 each, and you turn around and you sell your home for $300,000. Great for you because you sold your home for $300,000. But you need to be prepared that the folks that also live on that street, their home is now going to go up. Their taxes are going to go up because the value of their home is no longer $100,000 of what we sold what your house was worth. It's worth a lot more. So those people are going to look at it and say, why did my taxes go up twofold? Because it was only worth 100. Now you're saying that my house is worth 200 because house number 3 sold for 300. So the average has gone up in terms of the value of the home. So now you're going to be a little upset with the city because your taxes went up. But it didn't go up because the city increased your taxes. It went up because the value of your home went up. So if the value of your home goes up, your property taxes is going to go up. And it's actually interesting because I had a conversation with a Cape Verdean fellow who was complaining about his taxes being too high. And I said, well, let me look at your taxes. So I looked at it and I said, well, we have your house valued at $400,000. That's why your taxes is this. He goes, oh, no, my house is worth at least $600,000. I said, well, you know what? If you go and tell the city that your house is worth $600,000, what you're paying here in taxes is going to double because your property is worth a lot more than that. So that's what people need to understand, that it's not the fact that the city is increasing your taxes individually, but it's the fact that your property is gaining value, which is good for you, because if you bought a home for $150,000 3-4 years ago, it's now worth $300,000. It means it's doubled in value, but you also need to be prepared that it also doubled in tax value. So your taxes are going to go up as well.
Actually, I will go back to what you mentioned, commercial, taxes. Money the city will receive from businesses. But why are you talking about, the Cape Verdean fellow who came to you to complain about, his taxes? I would like you to address one key problem in Brockton: communication between you guys and the entire population. Since last September, all over we're talking about, budget deficit, blah, blah, blah. And when you say budget deficit affecting the school system, when we say the school system, we're talking about 82% are Cape Verdean, Haitian, I would say minorities. Even in English, not even one press conference from you guys, the mayor, the school committee, and the city council to address this issue, the deficit. The only information we got is every Tuesday when the school committee is meeting, when you have your monthly, meeting first Monday, or we have those economic development, meeting. You control basically the information. You don't come, to us, the media, to say, what's going on.
I'm going to say something that's probably going to shock you. You're absolutely right. We do a lousy job in communicating our story. We don't talk about the fact that, for a bunch of years, we had the number one urban school system in the state because we spend time comparing the Brockton schools to the Easton schools, to the Stoughton schools, to the Bridgewater schools, instead of comparing Brockton schools to Boston, Worcester, Springfield, Lawrence, Lowell, New Bedford, Fall River. Because we don't do that, because that's not sexy enough. It's easier to say that, you know, the regional schools are up here and we're down here because we are comparing apples and pineapples, not even apples and oranges, because those two tend to be about the same size. But the fact is that we do a lousy job in communicating the positive stories of Brockton. We don't do a very good job. We complain about the media all the time posting negative articles in the newspaper, negative articles in the media in Boston, but we don't do a very good job in promoting our own positive stories. The fact that, you know, we've got the largest high school in Massachusetts. You know, imagine putting 4,000 plus teenagers, late teenagers, in one building. I know what it was like when I was a teenager, you know, but yet you don't have the incidences that you see in some of the other schools, larger schools around the country, which means that we have a very good system. Yes, in the last year or so, all we've talked about is these deficits in the schools. And a lot of people sometimes have called. I mean, I get emails every single day that somebody's saying something like, well, you need to put more money into the schools. You need to put more finances into the school. Well, the schools, with all due respect, does not lack financial resources. What it lacks is management of those financial resources. When you look at it, back in 2013, my first year on the council, the school budget was about $100 million. Fast forward 10 years later, it's $206 million. So in 10 years, it grew from 100 to 200. My income didn't go up 100% from what I was making in 2013. Your income didn't go up 100% from what you were making in 2013, but yet the budget in the school system went up 100%. 100% of what it was in 2013. So it's not the lack of resources that we're putting into it. The issue is that we have lousy management of the school resources, which in turn somehow, because of the lack of management of those resources, forces the school system to lay off teachers, lay off classroom support, which would create problems for us in the system. That's what the issue is. But we do a lousy job in communicating the positive that actually takes place in the city. Look at the city budget. You look at the city budget, how much money out of our budget last year was $550 million. Out of that $550 million, how much did we put into promoting the city? How much did we put into advertisement to positively impact the city? How much did we put into commercials that you see on television to entice businesses to come into our community? Not much. It was everything. Let's make sure we pay the police, we pay the fire, we pay the schools, we pay the DPW. And we are hoping that businesses will come into our community, that people will say nice things about us. That is not happening. It hasn't happened. But we do not put a lot of resources into inviting positive messages to go out there.
Okay, talking about inviting business to come to Brockton, you may have 500 million, to spend on CNN every day to attract business. The first thing, do you have a plan?
Well, we have a plan. I mean, we have a planning department that basically plans for the community. We put all these plans in places, the urban renewal, some of these other plans that we have in place. But the issue is that we keep making the plans. Yeah, we have plans, but again, if we don't put resources behind those plans, it's not gonna serve its purpose. We keep planning. It's almost like there's a story that I've been told several times of a couple folks that lived in a nursing home for Alzheimer patients, and every day these two guys would get together and draw up a plan of how they're going to escape the facility. But because they have Alzheimer, they stash the plan and they go to bed. When they get up in the morning, They don't know where they put the plan, so they start a new plan again. You know, so every day they would plan out, okay, we're gonna go through that door, escape this facility, and that's how we're gonna do it. And they put it away, they come back the next day, they redoing the plan again. So that's what it seems like we do on a regular basis. We keep going over these plans. I mean, one of the plans that I have always dreamed about is returning two-way traffic on Main Street. Because it used to be two-way. Back in the days, because of politics, they changed it to one-way. Everybody talks about how we bring back downtown, Our Main Street is like a highway. People get on Main Street and they hit the only thing that they're concerned with is when am I gonna hit the next light so I can get out of this downtown area? So there's not controlled chaos traffic, which I think you need in your downtown. It's controlled chaotic traffic, controlled, but chaotic, meaning a lot of traffic. So these people would kind of buzz through our community, but we've had plans to turn that two-way traffic. I can't tell you how many plans. It kind of resembles the guys with Alzheimer in terms of plans to turn it into two-way traffic. We've done studies over studies over studies to do it. I remember when I was involved with the Harrington administration back in 2007, 8, and 9, we had plans to do it. We didn't have the resources to do it. But since, there's been 3 or 4 other plans that have actually been put into play in how to do that. Because we have plans, and those plans expire, and we have to do new plans. And then there's no resources, both locally, statewide or federal, to help us with those things. So it gets put on the back burner. We go to the next issue. So that's one of the things that we do. We've got plans, we just don't have the resources to deal with the plans that we have.
Yeah, at the beginning you mentioned, lack of state, money to invest in Brockton. I know at the state level, Massachusetts has someone like an office in DC. That person or these people, their job is going to the Capitol Hill, to make their case, for Massachusetts. That's why, for the past year, this administration, the Hill administration, they get a lot of money coming from DC. Now, in Brockton, we have a state delegation, we have one senator, we have 3 state reps. They are our contact with the state house. Now, do we have someone from City Hall who represent us, the city, let's say, in the state house?
Well, the long and short answer is no, we do not. I honestly think that we rely heavily on the legislators that we have, the senator and the 3 reps, to do what we can to bring resources into our community. But we ourselves do not lobby the state directly, as other communities do. We don't do that because there's also an issue, and I think in Brockton, we've had these issues for a long time. There's this little town mentality that exists in Brockton. Little town. It's like, you have to go in front of this board for permission to do this. You got to go in front of this board. Basically what little towns do. I often refer to Brockton in a joking way that we should change the name from Brockton and call it South Avon. Because sometimes we act, we wait for Avon to do something in order for us to copy it and do. We go to these meetings and we say, well, Stoughton did this, so why don't we try it because Stoughton did it? Well, Stoughton almost fits inside of your high school, but yet we're looking at these little towns for guidance instead of being proactive in our own way to basically say, no, we're going to do it this way because we are a city and this is how cities act. And we don't do a very good job in that in terms of demonstrating that we have the 4th largest school system in the state. We should act like we have the 4th largest school system in the state, not act like one of the small communities somewhere. If we have the 4th largest community in the state, it's safe to say that we're probably the 5th largest city in the state. Because if you're the 4th largest school system, there's a very good chance that you could be the 4th or the 5th, not the 7th, according to the census. But we don't act like it. We tend to act more like the smaller half of the 351 communities in Massachusetts than acting like the top 10 populations in Massachusetts. We don't do a very good job in demanding resources as the fourth or fifth largest community. We are thankful and grateful for the little crumbs that we get from time to time from the state, but we do not come out and demand like some of these other communities do for resources from the state or from even from the federal delegation.
Yeah, we are going to stay on the same topic, economic development, bringing business to Brockton. You mentioned the situation on Main Street, lately on your city council, meeting. It's like, a fight, every, first Monday of the month, this city councilor, fighting for his ward because too many homeless people, because, we cannot attract business because of the homeless. And we know those homeless, they don't live in Brockton. Most of them, they don't live in Brockton. But finally, how do we solve this problem?
Well, Yves, if I had an answer to solve homelessness in Brockton or in the state of Massachusetts or in America, I probably would be sitting next to Joe Biden in the White House. It's a complex issue. It's a complex issue because a lot of the homeless that we encounter in our community are having mental health issues that forces them into the street. I mean, I see, homeless individuals in our community that are not, older than their 50s or, most of them are not even 40 years old. These are young people with a lot of energy that could be working and providing for their families. So the reason why they're in the streets, in my opinion, again, it's because they have mental issues or they have some dependency issues that actually have put them in the streets. So if we could solve that issue, I mean, again, there's a perception of homelessness in Brockton because if you look at it, you've got a city of 100,000 plus people. You have less than 150 homeless people in the city of Brockton.
And just, in one area.
The problem is that when you see that 150 individuals going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, in the morning you might see them with a jacket, in the afternoon you might see them without a jacket, you're saying there's one, there's two, there's three, there's four. And visually it gives you this perception of a lot of homeless people. And it's not a lot of people, but it is a significant number because one is too many, because these are human beings living in the streets that are there because, probably not because of their choosing, but because of their situation that they're in the streets. So we have to figure out a way to deal with those issues, demand from organizations whose job it is to deal with homelessness, to do a little bit more than they're doing to help us out. But there's a lot of people that just don't want to come off the streets. They prefer to live on the streets. I knew individuals that I've dragged into, not dragged, physically dragged, but convinced to go to a shelter, and minutes later they're out of the shelter because they prefer to be on the street on their own. So we have to, as a government, again, Brockton does not have a great deal of resources. We can't sit here and say we're going to go create a hospital to deal with mental illness because we don't have the resources to do it.
But we have one big institution on North Pell Street. When you say mental health, we have this big hospital, the BMC, Brockton Behavioral Health Center. Is there, just for that?
Yeah, but they're taking care of a very insignificant number of individuals.
Okay.
They're not able to take a vast number of individuals. That is something that I think the state needs to take a little more of a proactiveness approach towards. And the federal government needs to take that issue of mental health a little more serious, because I think they look at it, well, it's not my people, it's not my type, it's not my color, so I don't have to deal with that stuff. So I think because of where the deep dollars are, the state and the federal government needs to take a more of a We used to have a ton of mental hospitals in this country back in the days. A lot of those went out of business. They shut them down. They didn't tweak them as to what the needs are in today's world, but they just shut them down. So a lot of those individuals that could be in those institutions receiving the care that they need are now in the streets hoping that general hospitals can come up with the treatment that they need. And that's, to me, what the issue is that I think we need to come back to an area. There's some individuals that they should be hospitalized. They have a chronic mental health issue, and they should be hospitalized and get taken care of. but sometimes they just get tossed on the streets because if they're not violently enough, they won't get hospitalized for the services that they need. I think that there's got to be a balance between, our wishes to see this end and also the folks that have the deep pockets to provide the resources that we have to help.
Yeah, it will be my last question on homeless in Brockton. So you say it's not Brockton problem. We agree with that. It's a state problem. It's a national problem. Basically, from the city government, what do you do with the state delegation? I'm talking about one senator and the 3 state rep, and also, the people who represent us at the federal level. How do you address this issue with them?
Well, I don't know if you remember this, but when I was the mayor, for the 7 months that I served as the mayor in the city of Brockton, one of the things that I did was I invited every single town manager of the towns that surround Brockton to come to a meeting to discuss the issue of homelessness. And they came, and one of the things that I basically said was, I just want to make sure that that we know that this is not a Brockton issue, a Brockton only issue. This is an issue because we have homeless individuals in our streets who are from Whitman, who are from Abington, who are from the Bridgewaters that are now living in the streets of Brockton. So it's not a Brockton issue, it has become a Brockton problem that we need you to help us deal with. Because it's not fair to the city of Brockton to take care of Brocktonians as well as people from the outside of the communities with the needs that you have, for you people just to wash your hands and act like the problem doesn't exist. So one of the things that we had in the works was to create programs, day programs throughout the communities. Like in Easton, they were supposed to do something in terms of a day program where we would be able to bus homeless folks from Brockton, from the shelter in Brockton, into Easton for a day type of program. Because if we have the homeless in day programs, and then they're not walking around in the streets, and at least kind of cut down on that perception of homelessness in our community. Because what happens, we've had businesses who want to invest in the city or in the downtown area, they'll come in and see all these homeless folks patrolling or walking around our city, and they're like, well, no, we're not interested in doing this. So it was actually hurting the economy of the city because they don't want to participate or be a part of a city that has all these issues, at least conjugated all in one area. So that's why I put the question to those town managers to help us with this problem. Remember, it might not be your problem, but you cause these issues because the prices in your homes have gone up so high that they can't afford to live in your community anymore, and they've become homeless. Or the issue surrounding your town is so difficult for them to deal with, or you don't have the resources where they could actually go get some mental health to deal with these issues, and they're coming into our community. We had that all in the works, but then what happened in the spring of 2020? The pandemic hit. The pandemic hit and everything changed. A new administration came in and had to deal with, Bob Sullivan came in, had to deal with the issues of the pandemic, and then the homeless issue that we had went back to the back burner. We got a bigger problem to deal with now, which is the pandemic. So hopefully someday soon, we're gonna go back to that thinking and that mentality to see how can we implant these day programs. It's okay that we don't mind having the shelters. We can have the shelters because we are a city, we're able to deal with those issues, but we need help on the day-to-day stuff. Because we can shelter the individuals, but during the day, we don't have enough resources to deal with the individuals that are sheltered in Brockton, so these communities need to pitch in and help us.
Yeah, talking about economic development, it's not only attracting business on Main Street. A lot of cities, a lot of businesses they are not located like restaurant, hotel on Main Street. They are in the suburb of the city. They have they attract other business. Do we have any space in Brockton? Let's say a big factory they want to build something in Brockton that can, hire, let's say, 200, 300, people? Do we have, this, physical space?
But Brockton has very few developing
Okay.
space, very few. We're an old city, the old shoe city that we were. A lot of the spaces are taken up. We don't have a great patch of land where we can say to Amazon, come and build a big distribution center somewhere, because then we're gonna have to displace some of the folks some of our residents. We don't have that. So we have to kind of somehow continue to attract smaller functioning commercial businesses to come into our community to make it a little more doable for both the residents and also the businesses that we're trying to attract. The issue is, again, you'll find this in a lot of the older cities, that they don't have a lot of space to develop and attract, these big factories like we had once upon a time ago. So what we've been doing is, there's been a lot of conversion from the old factories into residential properties or buildings. We will continue to do that because housing issue is also an issue in our community. Brockton is becoming very expensive to live. So we have to come up with a game plan where, we can increase the housing stock. And by increasing the housing stock, it is our hope that we will lower the cost of housing in our community, because it's getting a little difficult to keep Brocktonians in Brockton because of the housing crisis that the region is actually facing. So a lot of our folks are moving, southward into Taunton, New Bedford, Fall River, whereas a few years ago, people were moving from Boston into Brockton. Now, those folks are where you can rent an apartment in Boston for $4,000. You're going to move into Brockton if the apartment is $2,500 or $3,000 because it's cheaper than what you're paying in Boston. But it's basically unlivable for the people in Brockton because the poor folks that we deal with, the working class that we deal with, will have a tough time paying $3,500 for rent to live in an apartment in Brockton. So those folks are being pushed away from Brockton. So we're facing the same issue that Boston faced a few years ago.
Yeah. Now, if we can go back to the deficit, budget deficit in the school system, can you address, a key part of the deficit, transportation? A lot of people living in Brockton, they do not understand why the city is spending a lot of million, to bus, kids, from Brockton to other cities around.
Well, unfortunately, this is another one. Our government, plural, both the federal and the state level, they're very good at putting together mandates. You're mandated to do this, you're mandated to do this, you're mandated to do this, but yet there's never, here's some resources to go along with those mandates. So we're mandated by state law to transport people who are in shelters outside of Brockton back into Brockton. So we have a bunch of, a significant number of children who are in shelters, for instance, in Fall River, who are still coming to school in Brockton. So it's very expensive to transport, I think it's somewhere around $800 a week to transport one kid back into Brockton and back home in Fall River where they live. And that's happening all over the place because by law, we're supposed to, if you become homeless in Brockton and they put you in a shelter somewhere, we're still mandated to transport.
That's the last, address you had, basically.
We are supposed to do that. And those children deserve an education.
Yeah.
So, but we also need to have resources to be able to do that. But we're forced to do that. So the budget deficit that we have, 90% of the fault lies at the feet of the transportation of children that we have all over the place. We also eliminated some programs in Brockton which forced us to transport some children outside of Brockton for services, especially in special ed.
Yeah. Kids who are on IEP.
IEP or special education in the sense, they have to be transported to Hanover, to Pembroke, because that's where those programs are. And it's very costly to do. Of course, what happens is that we have to cost share the transportation of those kids into our system or out of our system. And that's what adds up. It adds up to where we budgeted, I believe, $11 million for transportation in 2023, and it ended up costing us, 20-something million dollars, leaving a deficit. You budgeted 11, and you're spending 20. There's $9 million budget, whole somehow, and that grew and grew and grew to a number now that when we started this year, we were looking that 18 million from 2023 was going to be 25 million. The good news is that I think we've done some cutting where we've brought back those numbers down to more sustainable numbers. Supposedly the state's going to help us in some ways in dealing with some of those deficits that we're facing, but it's the state of Massachusetts, so I won't hold my breath until that happens. Hopefully it will come, but it'll continue to be a problem, because if you don't take care of the issue, the problem's going to be if we continue to transport kids out of the system and we don't have the resources to do it, we're going to continue to have a deficit. Or we have to take it from elsewhere. We don't want to lay off police. We don't want to lay off fires. We don't want to lay off teachers, because our own kids that are going into our system need to be taught, need to have an education. So what ends up happening, you're going to have those issues elsewhere. You're going to have to cut elsewhere to deal with the issues that we're facing here in the city. So we don't want to do that. So we're going to continue to lobby. As a matter of fact, we meet with the state now. I, the mayor, the school committee vice chair, the solicitor, the CFO, we meet with the state folks on a regular basis. We had one last week. I think we're having another one in about 2 weeks, that we're going to come back and, they're saying to us, you have to make some cuts to control your expenses. But we're also saying you need to help us as well, because this is going to continue. It's not a one-time thing.
Talking about transportation, 2-3 years ago, you guys, or the CFO, you make the decision to go from renting buses to buy. And you guys, you came out with all those data, blah, 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 to show us, it's a good thing, for the city, to buy, to own buses instead of renting. And suddenly, this year, while we are facing this deficit, the same people who convinced us at that time to go with, buying, and they say, it's a mistake. Now we are going to back to renting. Can you explain that? Because, people are confused.
I was not one of those people, because I think buying those buses was a good decision. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
We were paying per student somewhere around $9 million a year, going up every year, to transport our kids. They transported our kids with old buses that were unreliable. We had a ton of kids that didn't go to school on time because the buses would either break down or they didn't have enough buses to transport the kids. So we found out that there were some monies that we can actually tap to help us buy these buses and control at least the flow of kids into school. Now, what ended up happening is, also another aspect is that we have a ton of nonprofit organizations that rely on bus transportations, churches, that you can actually rent to new places. I believe from what the school person said, one of the school personnel said that last year they had over $1 million in rental income that these buses brought into the system. People like the association, the churches, rented buses for programs all over the place. So it's great, and it's a very good promotional piece when you're in Boston, you see Brockton Public School System buses traveling through Boston or Providence or wherever they go. It's a sense of, again, we were talking about the lack of promotion of the city. Here's one promotional piece is that you see the buses going. At least you know that the city actually owns buses. So that, and the fact that you can control your own destiny in terms of what goes up and down, it was a good idea to buy those buses. And I'm not going to go back ever and say that they were a bad idea, because we as a community have benefited from those buses belonging to the City of Brockton. Now, what ended up happening is, I'm going to say we because I'm part of government, but the school system put the transportation department in the hands of people that knew nothing about transportation. So they ran the department where whatever sounded good, oh, we need more drivers. Okay, let's hire more drivers without any studies to try to figure out, do we really need more drivers? Or to tweak the route so that, if a bus is going from point A to point D and it's going through point C, B, C, maybe that we only need one bus to pick up kids in those other spots instead of sending 3 buses to those locations. Because not a very good job was done in terms, again, of putting people who knew transportation in charge of transportation. So it just kind of ballooned out of control. It became a snowball effect. It started small, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Frankly, the contract that the bus drivers were given is a non-sustainable contract. They've got a better contract than any other
city employee, yeah.
union employee within the city. Better than schools, better than the teachers, better than the fire department, the police department, DPW, you name it, they've got the better contract. They've got, I was told the other day, they've got basically unlimited personal days. They can take whatever days they want to take, unlimited. They work less hours than most people and get paid the same amount.
So basically now, are you going back to renting or?
No.
Okay.
No. I think what we need to do is manage the system better than it was, because with all the numbers that we had in place, by continuing to do what we were doing versus renting the buses, that we would save the taxpayers around $3 million a year. Now, that did not happen because, again, we had all these mandates that transportation, because what's costing the taxpayers or the city money is not the yellow buses. It's these private transport companies that they dished out a bunch of them. I think they had over 200 contracting companies to transport kids all over the place. I mean, it was interesting that if you have a kid that's going to school in Pembroke, now you look at towns in between Brockton and Pembroke, there's Abington, Rockland, Hanover, and then Pembroke. If you have a kid going to Pembroke and you have a kid going to Hanover or Rockland for school, they would have 3 different companies transporting 3 different kids instead of kind of putting them together and say, okay, you can drop one off in Abington, drop another one off in Rockland until you get to Pembroke. So you can take 3 kids instead of 1 kid. So they have 3 different companies going to the same direction, one just stopping in one stop versus the other. So that's what happens, I think, with transportation. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's not the issue of transportation. It's not the buses that are causing the issue. It's the management of it.
Talking about management, since, this crisis, way back in September, or August, we have 3 senior managers. The superintendent, we have the CFO for the school system, the deputy CFO. If I'm not mistaken, it's about $600,000 a year. They are on leave. And we have to pay other folks to do their job. And what's going on with this situation? How long we have to continue, to pay $600,000, and not receiving nothing?
Well, as you may know, or I know you know, there's an investigation going into to try to figure out exactly why was the issue of unbalancing the books taking place within the school system. So there's an investigation going on, and an investigation requires that the main characters, the main players, are placed on a leave. On admin leave.
Okay.
So while they're on admin leave, you have to carry their pay until the investigation is done and a decision is made, well, what to do with that situation. So it hurts the system because it's you said 600, but it's a lot more than 600. So when you look at it, it hurts the system because this is dead money because those individuals are not doing anything for the school system. But at the same time, you gotta go through the proper channels and the proper protocols and policies, in the sense that if you have a policy that states that while you are under investigation, you are put on admin leave, you have to put those individuals on admin leave until a decision is made. So we're hoping that A decision will be made on those investigations soon, probably within the beginning of the summer months, and then a final decision will be made on what happens to those individuals. But right now, it's just dead money that we are unfortunate to carry for its duration.
Now, talking about dead money, we are going to stay on the same topic. What prevent the city council to have some kind of control over the finance of the school system?
Well, under the city charter, the city council is the banker for the city. It's not the right word, but it's basically what we do. We're the keeper of the purse. Every single dollar that comes into the community goes to the city council, gets appropriated with a request from the administration, and then it gets dished out. Now, when it comes to the school side of it, the school has an elected body as well, which is the school committee. They are actually the keeper of the purse that the city council gives them. The money still comes to the city council through a budget process. And the city council, during the budget hearings, we pass on the budget of the school department to the school committee for management. Now, it's up to the school committee with the superintendent of schools to manage the funds that are provided by the city council. But we don't have a great deal of oversight because that oversight is delegated to that other elected body, which is the school committee.
Yep, but if I'm not mistaken, I did some research for this program. Way back in the 90s, when the city was under receivership, you have the city council has the authority right now to solve this problem.
Well, we do in a way because the Act of 1990 that actually put in place the receivership, when the city was under receivership, it actually have delegated, I'm not saying just the city council, I'm talking about city government.
Government, yep.
City government has a lot more say than we were believing or actually promoting, in a sense. Like one of the things that is within that act, that if you find that a department head knowingly or purposefully overspent, and we have one of the department heads sitting in the audience there, their delegated budget, they can be fired just for the fact that they did that. No investigation, no special meetings or anything. You've got a budget, you were given a budget, and if you purposefully or knowingly did not stay within the confines of those budgets, that is grounds for termination.
And now, why, everything, this crisis, we have to go to investigation that can take a year, 18 months. Why you cannot step in?
Well, it has, now that the process has begun, if there was no investigation that went into play, we could have done that. But now that once they kick in an investigation, we have to wait and abide by the decisions of the investigation, and we have to let that basically take its course and see what the results are going to be. Things will be different the next time around, because one of the things that I am doing now as the president of the city council is requiring the school department to come in, because as you know in the past from watching the council meeting, the school department's budget comes to the city council with the school committee recommends $200 million. The mayor
just the line item only.
It's one line, and we don't really look at the school committee recommended, the mayor recommended, and it's in front of us for appropriation. We normally appropriate those recommendations because they've done their budget work. They know what's coming in. The CFO knows what's coming in. The mayor knows what's coming in. So it's our job just to say, okay, well, if you say you need $200 million to run your school, we have $200 million coming in. It's not going to cost the city any additional funds from any of the other departments. Therefore, we let that recommendation go through. The questions in the council back in the days have been always around, hey, how's the school going? How many awards did we win? How many great accolades did we get? It's never been about digging into the budget. This year, it will be digging into the budget, because we're actually setting aside an entire day or night to look into the school budget and have the school departments within the school budget come to us to basically justify their budget, just like every other department in city government. That's what's going to be done different this year than it had never been done in the past years.
I go back to my data. 82% of kids going to the school system. They are Cape Verdean, Haitian, or Latin. The school committee dealing with 82% of parents who don't speak, most of them, English, and everything you are doing in English, and you don't work collaboratively with non-profit organizations serving those folks.
I think, at least in the next year or so, things have changed a great deal in the school committee. If you look at the school committee now, until last year, the most minority we've ever had in the school committee was one member. Currently, out of the 7 members of the school committee, 4 of them are full-fledged minority. 4 of them. So we have gone from 1 to 4, which technically they're now the majority of the city council members, of the school committee members. So I'm hoping, it is my hope, that since they're the ones who basically have the power to authorize movement within their budget, within the necessities that they actually have, that they will be able to act accordingly to make sure that there's a lot more, parents liaison that looks and sounds like us, that there's a lot more teachers that look and sound like us. So this is the hope that I have, is that we will see some drastic changes, because we got to be honest.
But you have to recognize, we have been living here for a long time. It's not because we have people who look like us in power, and they will, make decisions that will benefit, people like them.
Well,
it's not because, we have, 4 out of 7, and, everything will change, for the minorities in Brockton.
I'm not saying that everything is going to change overnight, but now you have a better chance. You have a better chance of getting things done than you did before, because when you look at a school system that was, 70, 80% of color, and you look at the city council or the administration of it, it's 95, 98% of non-color, of white folks. You can't expect a great deal of changes of the necessities of the people that are within that, because they don't have to deal with the people that they're basically charged to oversee. So now that the focus has changed a bit, where there's a lot more color in the administration of the system, it is my hope that they will move accordingly to make sure that those things are changed as far as the global.
We don't have a lot of job in Brockton. Parents, they have to go to work. A lot of people, they leave Brockton at 6 o'clock in the morning. Hold on. And they get back to Brockton at 8. When you have to organize a PTA and you receive an email on Tuesday and the meeting is tomorrow, do you think, every single Haitian or Cape Verdean, they can just call, the boss and say, oh, I will be, I have to leave work at 3 instead of 5? No. They have to take into consideration, people who are living in the city, most of them, they don't live in the city.
But remember, leave it up to the power, the folks sitting in power. Do you think that they're going to concede things to us if we're not demanding it? If I'm a parent of color and I'm interested in my child's education, and I'm interested in making sure that things change the way they're going, I'm going to be able to say to the school committee, or to the, if it means taking an afternoon off for me to go voice my opinion, I'll go and voice my opinion and saying, well, you need to change those PTO meetings, maybe put them on Saturdays, or put them on a Sunday, because most of us work Monday through Friday. If they have a room like this and it's filled with parents, their eyes are parents. They're not looking at black parent, purple parent, or whatever, it's parents. And if the black parents or the color parents aren't saying, you need to change this because this isn't working for us, it doesn't work for us, they're going to continue to do the same things. Because again, power, they're in power, they're not going to give you anything without you demanding that things change. And the fact is, sometimes we, people of color, we cut our folks a little too much slack. We cut our folks way too much slack, Not everybody in the city is working until 8 o'clock at night to go to a council meeting and sit there without saying anything, just to sit there. Just sit, don't say anything. Because sometimes there's discussions that takes place at the council level where some of us are saying, we need to do this for our people. And then they look around and they say, where's your people? Where are your people that you're so concerned with? You know, we have discussions about sports fields. Sports fields. There's a meeting at the council to discuss what we're going to do in needs of, is it going to be soccer? Is it going to be baseball? Is it going to be football? Oh, my people play soccer. My people's this, where are your people? There's not a single person sitting in the audience that's saying, yeah, I talked to you about this, and I'm here representing you, but you got to be able. The reason why most of us that came around my time were all Spanish speakers is because back in those days, the SOL was for, you know, you spoke English, you're fine, you're over here. You spoke whatever, you were here in the Spanish program. So we had to learn Spanish in order to learn English. But what else happened with some of us is that we basically picked it up and progressively tried to move forward as we could. But at the same time, we had our own needs and necessity. I had my own needs and necessity. But the idea, look that way, right? But the idea is that I belong to one of the largest church in the community. Every time I have some issues that I want to share with the community, I make sure that issue is passed on to the people in the church. We have television programs. It might not have the biggest viewership or whatever, but it's done in various languages that we talk about the issues to try to educate our people to know what they need to do. We have organizations in the community. I can just name a couple, for instance, because I'm very connected with both of them. One is the Cape Verdean Association, and the other one is Haitian Community Partners, who are in the community trying to do whatever they can with the lack of resources that they have to educate our community whichever way they can to share that information. Those organizations didn't exist when I came to this country as a teenager. I wish they did, because I might have gotten a lot more further than I did without their help. So there's programs out there. Now, is there a need for additional stuff? Absolutely. You know, Yves and I talk about all the time that we have the directors of communications in city government or in the school system. Who are they communicating with? You know, are they communicating, is it just Channel 4? Then they're not doing MCTV or some of these other programs that exist? Yeah, I think it is the issue, because there's a lot more bells and whistles with Channel 4 than it is with MCTV. So we could actually do a lot more in city government, a lot more within even the organizations that we deal with to help promote the ideas that we want to push or educate the folks that we want to do. But we are restricted too. I am restricted. I have to have a full-time job and be the city council and now the city council president at the same time. You know, so we're restricted. But I think our communities, though, too, need to be, they know that the association exists. You know, we have the new Greater Brockton Minority Business Association to help these small businesses that we have in the community that had never been involved with the chamber and some of the other groups that help small businesses. We have something. We put out calls for them to come and be members or whatever, and a lot of them don't see the value behind it. But it's not for lack of trying to get them involved in that stuff. You know, so I come back with the fact is that we need to continue to do the things that we're doing. We cannot lose hope and say, I'm giving up because this isn't working anymore, because there's been some successes in the community that we should be proud of.
Which is great. But if you look at that, if we were waiting, for example, when I'm going deep, if we was waiting for the slave owners for the mercy of the slave owners to tell us, okay, we got enough of you, you will never get out of slavery. So today, We need, where is a lack of communication, they need or so-called ambassadors representing those people. Do they get at the roots of the problem with those people? Because equity cannot be obtained unless those who are affected are part of the process. Where is the gap? Where we are missing the gap to raise, either to the church, to grassroots organization, and us to make those people understand. Unless you are educated to understand the matter, you cannot be part of the process. You cannot be part of the America. Yes, we're proud of our bubble, but we have to get out of the bubble to be part of that system.
I agree with you 1,000%. It has to be a community effort. And what I mean by a community effort is exactly what you just talked about. The churches, the politicians that somehow have made it, the media, whatever media we have in the community, the doctors that we have that are taking care of people or taking care of programs out there. It needs to be a concerted effort because you're absolutely right. They're not going to give anything because if they give us something, that means they're losing something. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to give it. They're not going to give it to us. So we have to continue to ask and demand those things, but we need everybody to do their little bit to help us out. Because if we just look at it and say, well, we got that black city council president, let's just go and see if that black city council president is going to be able to do it. He's not going to be able to do it alone. I'm one of 11 members of the council. And we have, although I might be the chief of the council this time around, next year I'll go back to being one member of the council because our presidency only lasts 1 year. Mm-hmm. But then I'll go back to being one of 11, just like I'm one of 11 now. And when things get put to a vote, it normally passes 7-4, you know, or it fails 4-7, you know. So we don't have the numbers up there yet to do the things that we need to do. But we also need everybody to kind of get on board and say, I'm not going to sit back and wait for those guys to do it because those guys might be limited to what they have not to be able to do it. But our community, though, too, those that have gone and survived that the laundry bag, that somehow have gotten out of the laundry bag, they need to come back and help us, help other folks within the bag. Because there's still plenty of people in that bag, but those that are no longer in the bag need to start stepping up and helping us out. We can't do it ourselves or by saying, well, but you run the association, you go do it. Well, you know what, the association, I can't even afford to pay the light bills to keep the lights on because you're sitting up in Boston next to the governor and you didn't kind of nudge the governor to help us. So how you expect me to come out and help you if you're not helping us? So everybody, you know, everybody that has their credential out there, doctors, lawyers, whatever, within the struggle, need to somehow help us out in order for us to do this. Because one person alone isn't going to be able to do it. Because in democracy, it's one vote that counts. And my vote will be there. But is the other 10 going to go along with what I'm preaching? And we can't. It's not arm wrestling. It's not whoever's the strongest that wins. It's votes that count. You know, and we got to count the votes and making sure that our people, through education, are not just voting during presidential election, show up and vote on the local election, because when we change things locally, then we can have these discussions at the local level that has a lot more impact than what the federal levels can bring us.
All right. So on behalf of, you know, our team, MCTV, we thank you, Mr. President, you know, for coming for our first, you know, community dialogue with elected officials. We give you 30 seconds.
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. It's great. I think it's nice to see that your program is able to bring folks who are in certain positions of authority, if you call that what we have, to come and speak with the folks that are watching the program. It's important for us to continue to have this dialogue so that people understand that, you know, there's people out there that care about them. It might be limited care because sometimes we put way too much on that caring, but I can care, but if I don't have the resources to give you something, then all I can do is tap you in the shoulder, tap you in the head and say, I care, I care, I care. But if I don't have the resources to do it, and the only way we gain resources is with power, you know, to give us power, both elected power or power of demand, then we're going to continue to do the same thing. But I think it's important for us to come out and show our folks that, you know, we're here because we care, but at the same time, we're here because we depend on you to provide us the authority and the hand for us to get anything done in this community.